When we gathered here last Sunday, Easter Sunday, we had Mary Magdalene weeping for joy as she ran, run Mary run, to find the disciples, pass on the news to them, and she did. And she said, I have found the Lord, I have seen the Lord. And upon hearing these words of glad tidings of great joy, the disciples responded, I doubt that. The disciples, when the word of Jesus' rising was brought to them, they didn't believe. Simon Peter went to the tomb. He entered first. He looked around. He was puzzled. The beloved disciple, John, walked into the tomb. He saw and believed. But if we remember that first reading we had today from the Acts of the Apostles, also written by Luke, that the community was of one mind and one heart. At that time, they were not quite there yet. Mary Magdalene was an apostle to the apostles, and she had to win them over, because their first thought was, Jesus, he died on the cross. You put him in the tomb. Mary brought them that news, that good news. And in the moment, a believing community was beginning to be formed, one at a time, one soul at a time. Mary Magdalene, the beloved disciple, all of them eventually. In fact, Jesus, in John's Gospel, Jesus appears at the end of the first day, in a locked room no less. For the disciples, they are worried sick what's going to happen to them should the Jewish leadership find out where they are. They're in a locked room. Jesus appears. And they must be thinking, Mary was right. And despite their fear or their trepidation, he says to them, peace be with you. Jesus transforms the disciples. They come to believe. They are rejoicing. Come, see the wounds in my side. Touch my hand. But Thomas wasn't there. Where was he? A week later, they're all assembled again. Thomas is with them. This time, Jesus appears. This time, Thomas, he proclaims his faith. You know, it's interesting, all that's in here at the start of this resurrection account. We sometimes wonder, why was Thomas not inclined to believe? Why did he need to see for himself? The gospel writer doesn't tell us why. But you might imagine maybe some of the disciples were thinking, Thomas is persisting in his point of view. Maybe I was hasty. Let's say that Thomas's doubt is a gift to us. How many times in our lives have we had some thoughts, some doubts? We're not quite sure. Our relationship with the Lord, our relationship with one another, all that goes with that. We have our doubts. But much like Jesus is that transforming experience for Mary Magdalene and the other disciples, for us too. We see Thomas in this moment of transformation. What's your moment of transformation? When did you come to believe about Jesus in your heart and know him? Or if you have continuing doubts, where are those moments of bright light for you? Where are those moments of hope? Where are those moments that touch you and say, despite everything that's going on around me, I know I can place my trust in the Lord. I might be having tough days. I might have my doubts from time to time, but at its core, Jesus is at the center of my life, and I will never let that go. I will never let that go. How do our churches today compare to the early disciples, the early communities of churches, those first generations? Well, we gathered here the Word and Sacrament. They gathered and prayed as Jesus taught them around the table at the night before he died. They shared God's Word. We've got books, we've got papers, we've got the Word here, we've got the Word there. Their Word was in their hearts. Their Word was passed on orally. They passed it on faithfully. Think about this. In your conversations with one another, how often do we say exactly word for word what the other person told us? We might forget. We might spin it a little. We might embellish it a little for our own purposes. They did not. The earliest centuries, the earliest times of the church, they honored the Word. They celebrated the table. They were witnesses to Jesus, and they are witnesses to us generations later. What can we do in our lives, remembering the way Jesus transformed Mary Magdalene, the way Jesus touched the heart of the beloved disciple, the way Jesus won them all over, even Thomas, the doubting one. He's a gift to us to tell us that even in our doubts, we can find faith. Let's leave room in our hearts for the Lord. Folks, let us rejoice and be glad. It is the Easter season. We have much to celebrate. We have much to be thankful for, not the least of which is we've been invited, like the disciples, like Mary Magdalene, to be apostles to the world, because Jesus comes to transform the world. Everyone who meets Jesus, everyone who encounters Jesus, their lives are changed. And we live in a world that is hungering and thirsting for the kind of change Jesus looks to bring. Can we be his disciples? Can we be his people in the world to go and make that so? Make that come about. Mary Magdalene ran to find the disciples. What are we going to do to bring the word to one another? Jesus appeared to the disciples to allay their concerns. He spoke to their hearts. He spoke to their doubts. What can we do in patience and love for one another? To listen to one another, listen to our hearts, open them and heal them. Folks, let us rejoice during this Easter season. Alleluia, alleluia.